Mila and Noor had lived in the same small home for 43 years. The paint was faded and the front steps leaned a little, but it was still their place. They knew every creak in the floor and every tree in the yard. Noor had built a swing long ago and Mila still wiped dust from it even though no one used it now. Their life was not rich, but it was calm and honest and steady. Then the letter came. It was plain white with heavy words inside. The land had been bought. The area would be rebuilt. They had 30 days to leave. Noor read it twice and his hand shook. Mila sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall like the wall had betrayed her. They were not young. They did not have children to run to. They did not have money to fight. They had only each other. Noor went to talk to the office in town. He wore his best shirt and held his cap like a polite man. The worker behind the desk did not look up much. She said rules were rules. She said it was all legal. She said the papers were signed. Noor asked where they were supposed to go. The worker gave a small shrug like that was not her problem. Noor came home with empty hands and a heavy face. Mila tried to stay strong. She cooked lentils and rice and pretended the normal routine could stop the future. Noor tried to fix things around the house as if repairs could make it harder to take. He patched a crack in the wall. He tightened a loose hinge. He even painted the front step again. Mila watched him and her eyes filled, but she never let the tears fall in front of him. At night they whispered. Maybe the town would help. Maybe a distant cousin would answer the phone. Maybe they could find a small room somewhere. Each idea sounded smaller than the last. Each idea felt like a door closing. On the final week the wind turned cold. Mila packed their plates in an old cloth. Noor wrapped their family photo in a towel. They owned little, but every item carried years. Mila touched the edge of the photo frame and remembered birthdays and prayers and quiet mornings. Noor lifted their old kettle like it was gold. Their life was simple, but it was theirs. On the last day a truck arrived. 2 men stepped out and spoke like the whole thing was normal. Noor asked for more time. One man pointed at the paper again. The other looked at his watch. Mila stood on the porch holding a small bag and feeling like the ground had moved under her feet. When Noor finally closed the door for the last time, he paused and pressed his palm against the wood. It was a goodbye he never wanted to say. They left with what could fit in their small car. Noor drove without speaking for a long time. The road was grey and long. Mila watched trees pass like a sad parade. She tried to pray, but her thoughts scattered. She held her bag on her lap and felt like she was holding her heart. They ended up on a back road they had never taken before. Noor said he just needed to breathe. He did not want to drive into the town and sit in a noisy shelter. Mila did not argue. She understood his pride. She understood his fear too. The back road led into thick woods. The trees were tall and close together and the light was dim under them. The air smelled like wet leaves and pine. The road became rough and narrow. Mila finally spoke and asked if they should turn back. Noor shook his head and said just a little more. He did not know why he kept going. He only knew that going back felt like giving up. Then the car sputtered. Noor pressed the pedal, but the engine coughed. A warning light blinked. Noor pulled over near a bend where the road widened slightly. Mila looked around and saw nothing but trees and shadows. Noor opened the hood and stared like staring could fix it. The old car had served them well, but even old friends get tired. Mila stepped out and hugged her shawl tighter. The cold went through the cloth. She looked at Noor and saw the worry on his face. She wanted to say it would be fine, but she did not want to lie. Noor tried a few things and then closed the hood slowly. He said the car needed help. He said his phone had no signal. He said they might have to walk. Mila looked at the woods again. Her stomach tightened. Walking where? To what? They were 2 tired people with bags in their hands and nowhere to go. The thought made her knees feel weak. Noor took their bags and said they would find a place to rest for the night. He pointed down the road and said he saw a small sign back there. Mila did not remember any sign, but she trusted him because what else could she do? They began walking. Their footsteps sounded small in the quiet forest. The road curved and rose and fell. Mila's breath formed thin clouds in the cold air. Noor walked beside her and kept glancing at her like he was counting her strength. Mila tried not to slow him down. She did not want to be the reason he broke. After half an hour they saw the sign. It was old wood with faded paint. It said lodge in big letters. Under it an arrow pointed into a narrow path that left the road and disappeared between trees. Mila stared at it like it was a story sign from another world. Noor stepped closer and touched the wood. It felt real. Mila asked who would build a lodge out here. Noor said maybe hunters. Maybe travelers. Maybe it was empty now but still standing. Mila did not like the idea of walking into an unknown place. But the sun was going down and the cold was getting sharper. Noor looked at her and she saw that he was trying not to show fear. They followed the path. It was covered in fallen leaves. Branches scratched their sleeves. The forest became thicker and quieter. Mila's heart beat faster. Noor kept his shoulders firm like a shield. Then the trees opened suddenly and they saw it. The lodge stood in a small clearing. It was bigger than Mila expected. Dark wooden walls. Wide windows. A stone chimney rising tall. The roof was steep and strong like it could handle heavy snow. It looked old but cared for. There was no light inside but the building did not look broken or abandoned. It looked like someone had left only a short time ago. Mila whispered that they should not go in. Noor said they would knock first. They walked up the front steps and Noor knocked on the thick door. The sound echoed into the quiet. He waited. No one answered. He knocked again. Still nothing. Noor tried the handle gently. The door was locked. Mila let out a breath that felt half relief and half disappointment. Then Noor looked to the side and saw something near the door frame. A small metal box like the kind used for keys. It had a number wheel on it. Mila's eyes widened. Noor did not touch it right away. He stared like he was thinking about what it meant. Mila asked why a lodge in the deep woods would have a key box. Noor said maybe it was rented to travelers. Maybe people came here sometimes. Mila's mind raced. If it was rented then someone would return. If it was owned then entering could be trouble. But they were cold. They were tired. And the night was coming fast. Noor looked around the clearing. There were no cars. No footprints in the fresh thin frost on the grass. No smoke from the chimney. The place was silent and still. Then Mila noticed something else. On the corner of the lodge near a window there was a small camera. It was pointed toward the steps. Mila froze. Noor followed her gaze and his face tightened. Mila whispered that someone was watching. Noor swallowed and said maybe it was old and not working. But he did not sound sure. They stood there for a moment, both hearing their own breathing. The forest around them felt like it was holding its breath too. Noor finally said they could not stay outside all night. Mila knew he was right. She hugged her shawl and nodded slowly. Noor walked along the side of the lodge and checked the windows. Most were locked. Then he found one small window in the back that was slightly open, like it had been left for air. Noor looked at Mila like he was asking permission without words. Mila did not want to say yes. But she also did not want to imagine the dark cold road again. Noor pushed the window carefully and it opened wider. He climbed in slowly and then reached back to help Mila. Mila's hands trembled as she climbed through. When her feet touched the floor inside, a strange feeling ran through her, like she had stepped into someone else's life. The lodge smelled clean. It smelled like wood and soap and something warm like old books. The room was large with a fireplace and couches and a long table. Everything looked expensive but quiet. There were lamps and rugs and shelves full of thick folders. Mila stared at the folders because they looked more like office papers than vacation things. Noor whispered that they should only rest and leave in the morning. Mila nodded quickly. Noor found a blanket folded neatly on a chair. Mila touched it and felt how soft it was. She felt a sudden wave of emotion. Not just sadness. Also confusion. How could such comfort exist here while they had just lost everything? Noor moved toward the fireplace and looked for matches. Then Mila saw something that made her stomach drop. On the wall above the fireplace was a framed photo. It showed the lodge from above, like it was taken by a drone. The picture looked new. and in the corner of the frame there was a small printed date. It was from only 2 weeks ago. Mila turned to Noor and whispered that someone had been here recently. Noor stepped closer and stared at the photo. His jaw tightened. He looked around the room again, slower this time, as if the lodge had changed just because of that date. Then Noor noticed a door at the far end of the room. It was not like the other doors. It was metal, not wood. It had a keypad and a handle like a vault. Noor walked toward it without thinking. Mila followed, her heart racing. Noor stopped in front of the metal door and stared. On the keypad, a small green light blinked slowly, like the door was alive. Mila felt her throat go dry. Because this was not a normal lodge. And whatever was behind that door was the real reason this place existed. Mila stood near the metal door while Noor slowly walked around the large room trying to understand what kind of place they had entered, and the soft lamplight made long shadows on the wooden walls and every shadow felt like a hidden eye watching them, and Mila could feel her heart beating in her ears as she held Noor's hand and whispered that this lodge was not just for rest but something more, and Noor nodded because the folders on the shelves and the metal door and the camera outside all felt like pieces of a strange puzzle that did not belong to an empty forest lodge. Noor moved closer to the long table and picked up one of the thick folders, and he opened it slowly, and inside were many pages with numbers and lines and strange codes, and Mila could not read most of it, but she could tell it was not something normal people would keep, and Noor looked at the pages with wide eyes and then closed the folder gently as if the papers could hear him, and Mila whispered that they should not touch anything else, and Noor agreed, but his mind was already racing because he had never seen such serious-looking documents in his life. The air inside the lodge felt warm, but Mila still felt cold in her bones, and she walked to a window and gently pulled the curtain aside, and outside the forest was dark and quiet, and the car was still on the road far away, and the path back looked long and lonely, and Mila realized they could not leave now even if they wanted to because the night had fully come and the cold was strong, and Noor came beside her and said they would rest for a few hours and leave at first light, and Mila nodded even though she knew this place was not safe. Noor placed their small bags near a couch and found a lantern on a shelf and turned it on, and the soft yellow light filled the room and made it feel almost normal for a moment, and Mila sat on the couch and held her hands together trying to calm herself, and Noor walked toward the fireplace again and found dry wood already placed inside like someone had prepared it, and this made Mila feel uneasy because it meant someone planned to come back, and Noor lit the fire carefully, and the crackling sound made the room feel alive. As the fire grew, Mila felt a little warmth in her fingers and she slowly relaxed, but her eyes kept moving back to the metal door and she wondered what was behind it and why someone would hide such a door in a lodge in the woods, and Noor also kept glancing at it, and he finally said he wanted to see if it was locked, and Mila quickly told him not to, but Noor said just a look would not hurt, and he stepped closer and gently touched the keypad and the green light stayed on, and Noor pulled his hand back like it was hot. Mila whispered that the lodge was not meant for people like them, and Noor said he knew, but they had nowhere else to go, and Mila understood that pain because losing their home had already taken so much from them, and now even finding a safe place to rest felt impossible, and she leaned her head against Noor's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, and for a moment they just listened to the fire and tried to feel safe. Then Mila noticed something on the table near the folders, and it was a small notebook, and she picked it up and opened it, and inside were handwritten notes and dates, and some words were circled, and Mila saw one line that said delivery complete and another that said secure funds, and her eyes widened and she showed it to Noor, and he frowned and took the notebook and read more slowly, and his face grew serious. Noor said that whoever owned this lodge was hiding something very important, and Mila felt a chill run through her, and she thought about the number in the title of their story, and she did not know it yet, but this place was tied to a huge amount of money and power and secrets that could change many lives, and she felt very small in that moment. The fire suddenly made a loud pop, and Mila jumped and Noor held her tighter, and then they heard another sound, and it was not from the fire but from outside, and it sounded like a distant engine, and Noor quickly went to the window and carefully looked out, and Mila followed and saw two lights far down the road slowly moving closer, and her heart started to race again because someone was coming. Noor whispered that maybe it was just a traveler, but the way the lights moved slow and steady made it feel planned, and Mila felt fear rise in her chest, and she said they should hide, and Noor nodded and quickly turned off the lantern, and the room became darker with only the fire giving light, and they moved behind a large couch and stayed very still as the lights outside grew brighter. The car stopped near the path to the lodge, and Mila could see shadows moving and then voices low and calm, and Noor held Mila's hand tightly and she could feel his palm was cold with worry, and they stayed quiet as footsteps came closer and the front door handle moved, and Mila closed her eyes hoping whoever it was would go away. The door opened and two figures stepped inside, and their faces were not clear but their voices were firm and confident, and they spoke about checking the place and making sure everything was fine, and Mila realized these were not lost travelers but people who belonged here, and Noor slowly leaned closer to her and whispered that they must not be seen. The two people walked around the room, and one of them went to the shelves and looked at the folders, and the other walked toward the metal door and typed a code, and the door opened with a soft sound, and Mila's heart nearly stopped because she could not believe how easily they entered it, and Noor's eyes were wide as he watched them open the door to whatever was hidden inside. The man near the door said that everything was still there and that no one had touched it, and the other one said good because this place held too much value to risk, and Mila heard the word value and she felt dizzy and scared because it meant something very important was behind that door, and she realized they were standing in the middle of something far bigger than just a lost lodge. The two men stayed inside the metal room for a few minutes and then came back out and locked the door again, and Mila saw one of them look around the room, and for a moment his eyes passed over the couch where Mila and Noor were hiding, and her breath caught, but he did not see them, and he turned away and said they should leave and come back in the morning. When the door closed again and the engine sound faded, Mila and Noor stayed still for a long time until the forest was quiet once more and only the fire remained, and Mila finally let out a shaky breath, and Noor whispered that they were lucky to not be found, and Mila nodded but her heart was still pounding. They slowly came out from behind the couch, and Noor closed the curtains and added more wood to the fire, and Mila sat down and held her head because she felt overwhelmed, and Noor knelt beside her and said they would leave as soon as it was light, and Mila agreed because staying here was too dangerous. But even as she said that, Mila could not stop thinking about the metal door and the notebook and the word secure funds, and she knew that this lodge was hiding a secret so big that it could change their broken lives forever, and she did not know yet that this was only the beginning. The fire burned quietly as Mila and Noor sat together in the dark lodge, both knowing that whatever was behind that metal door was tied to their future, and the coming morning would bring a truth neither of them could escape. Morning light slowly entered the lodge through the thick curtains, and Mila opened her eyes feeling tired and unsure, and the fire had turned to soft red embers, and Noor was already awake sitting near the window watching the forest, and his face looked tense and careful like he was waiting for something, and Mila quietly sat up and held her shawl around her shoulders as she remembered the night before and the two people and the metal door and the way the lodge had suddenly felt dangerous. Noor whispered that he heard nothing after the car left, and Mila nodded and said maybe they were safe for now, and Noor said they should leave as soon as the light was strong enough, but Mila felt something inside her pulling her back to the secret of the lodge, and she did not know why, but she felt like fate had brought them here for a reason, and she said maybe they should try to understand what was inside the metal room because it could be something that could help them, and Noor looked at her with surprise and worry but also curiosity. Noor walked slowly toward the metal door, and Mila followed him with her heart beating fast, and the keypad still showed the small green light, and Noor thought about the numbers they had seen one of the men type the night before, and he tried to remember the pattern, and Mila closed her eyes and whispered that she trusted him, and Noor carefully pressed the same numbers he remembered, and to their shock the light changed and the door made a soft sound and slowly opened. Mila gasped softly, and Noor pushed the door open just enough for them to see inside, and the room behind it was bright and clean with white walls and strong lights and shelves filled with metal boxes and large cases, and on one table were many bundles wrapped tightly, and Noor stepped inside slowly and Mila followed, and both of them felt like they had walked into another world. Noor gently opened one of the metal boxes, and inside were stacks of paper money, and his hands started to shake, and Mila covered her mouth because she had never seen so much money in one place, and she felt weak in her knees, and Noor whispered that this must be the secret of the lodge, and Mila nodded because the room was full of wealth beyond anything they could imagine. They walked deeper into the room and saw a screen on the wall showing numbers and names and places, and Mila could not understand it all, but she could tell it tracked the money, and Noor said softly that this must be what those men were protecting and that this place held a huge fortune, and Mila suddenly remembered the words from the notebook and the number in the story, and she realized that this lodge was hiding a fortune of 275 million, and her heart felt like it might stop. Noor leaned against the wall trying to steady himself, and Mila held his arm, and both of them knew that this discovery could change everything for them, but it also meant danger because whoever owned this money would not want anyone to find it, and Mila whispered that they should leave right now and forget what they saw, but Noor looked at her with eyes full of pain and hope and said this money could save them from losing everything and from being pushed aside by the world. Mila felt torn because she did not want trouble, but she also did not want to return to a life of fear and no home, and she knew Noor felt the same, and they stood there in silence surrounded by more money than they had ever dreamed, and finally Noor said they would only take a small amount, just enough to survive and start fresh, and Mila nodded slowly even though her heart was heavy. Noor carefully took a small bundle from one of the boxes and put it inside his coat, and Mila watched every movement with fear and excitement mixed together, and she whispered that they must be quick, and Noor agreed, and they closed the box again and left the metal room and locked the door just like they found it, and Mila felt like they were walking away from a sleeping giant. They gathered their bags and prepared to leave the lodge, and Noor looked outside, and the forest was quiet and bright, and the cold air looked clean, and Mila took a deep breath and felt like she was stepping into a new life, even if it was filled with risk, and they quietly opened the back door and stepped into the clearing. But as they walked toward the path, they heard a sound again, and it was the same engine from the night before, and Noor froze, and Mila felt her heart drop because the people were coming back and they had no time to hide now, and the car drove into the clearing and stopped near the lodge, and two figures stepped out again. Noor held Mila's hand, and they both stood still because running would only make things worse, and one of the people saw them and stopped and spoke in a sharp voice asking who they were and what they were doing here, and Noor took a deep breath and said they were lost and needed shelter, and Mila nodded and tried to look calm. The people walked closer and looked at them carefully, and one of them looked past them toward the lodge and then back at Noor and Mila, and his eyes were narrow and curious, and Mila could feel the bundle of money inside Noor's coat like a burning secret, and she feared it would be discovered. The person asked if they had been inside the lodge, and Noor said yes, and that they only rested because they had nowhere else to go, and Mila added that they were old and had no home now, and the truth in her voice made it sound real, and one of the people seemed to soften a little while the other still looked doubtful. The softer one said that this was private property and that they should not be here, but seeing their tired faces he told them to leave and never return, and Mila felt relief wash over her, and Noor nodded quickly and thanked them, and they began walking away slowly, not daring to look back. As they reached the path, Noor and Mila both felt their legs shaking, but they kept walking until the lodge was hidden by trees, and only then did they allow themselves to breathe, and Mila held Noor and said they were safe for now, and Noor said they had been given a second chance. They walked back toward the road where their car was waiting, and Noor said they would use the money to fix the car and find a small place to live, and Mila smiled softly because even a small new beginning felt like a gift after all they had lost, and she looked back once toward the forest knowing that the secret of the lodge was still there waiting. The sun rose higher in the sky, and Mila and Noor moved forward into a future filled with hope and fear, and a hidden secret that would soon bring even more change into their lives, as the story of the lodge was far from over. Mila and Noor walked along the quiet road with the forest behind them and the rising sun in front of them, and even though the morning felt peaceful, their hearts were still beating fast because they knew they were carrying a secret that could change their lives forever, and Noor kept his hand over his coat where the small bundle was hidden, and Mila stayed close to him, afraid that even the wind might reveal what they carried. When they reached their car, Noor tried to start it again, and this time it came to life with a tired sound, and Mila felt relief wash over her, and they both climbed inside and drove away slowly, leaving the hidden lodge behind them, and as the road turned into a wider highway, Mila looked back one last time and whispered a quiet thanks because that strange place had given them a chance to survive. They drove to the nearest town and found a small quiet place where they could rest, and Noor used some of the money to pay for repairs and food, and Mila felt strange handing over money that had come from such a secret place, but she also felt thankful because they could finally breathe again, and for the first time since losing their home they slept in warm beds without fear. Days passed and Mila and Noor stayed in the town keeping to themselves, and they spoke little about the lodge, but both of them thought about it often, and the hidden room and the fortune still waiting there, and Noor worried that the people who guarded it might be searching for anyone who had seen too much, and Mila worried that their quiet new life could be taken away just as suddenly as the old one. One evening Noor saw something in the news on a small screen in a cafe, and he called Mila to look, and it spoke about missing funds and a hidden operation and people in power being questioned, and Mila felt her stomach tighten because she knew it was connected to the lodge, and Noor realized that the secret place in the forest was part of something much larger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Noor told Mila that the people who owned the money would soon be in trouble and that the lodge might no longer be safe, and Mila said that maybe that meant the money could be found and returned to where it belonged, and Noor looked at her and said that maybe the money had been taken from many places and many people, and that the truth was more complicated than they could understand. Mila thought about the way they had been pushed out of their home and how the world did not care about people like them, and she felt that the small amount they took was not a wrong thing because it helped them survive and start again, and Noor nodded because he felt the same, and they both agreed they would use the money carefully to build a simple, peaceful life. Weeks passed and Mila and Noor found a small cottage near a quiet river, and they moved in, and it was not big but it was warm and safe, and they planted flowers outside, and Mila smiled as she worked in the soil and felt like she was growing roots again, and Noor fixed the small fence and felt proud to build something new with his hands. Sometimes Mila would wake at night thinking about the lodge and the metal door and the huge fortune still hidden there, and she would feel a mix of fear and wonder, and Noor would hold her and remind her that they were safe now, and that was what mattered most, and Mila would slowly fall back asleep with hope in her heart. One day a letter arrived with no return name and Noor opened it carefully, and inside was a short message saying that the lodge had been found empty and the money taken by authorities and that the operation was ended, and Mila felt a deep breath leave her chest because it meant the danger had passed and the secret that had haunted them was finally gone. Noor smiled softly and said that fate had guided them to the lodge at the right moment, and Mila nodded because she believed that too, and they both knew that their journey through loss and fear had led them to a new beginning and a chance to live with dignity again. As seasons changed, Mila and Noor settled into their new life, and they helped others in small ways and shared what they could, and their hearts felt lighter with each act of kindness, and they often thought about how close they had come to losing everything and how a hidden lodge in the forest had given them a second chance. One evening as the sun set over the river, Mila sat beside Noor and held his hand and said that even though the lodge was full of secrets, it had also been a place of hope, and Noor agreed and said that sometimes the darkest places hide the brightest chances, and Mila smiled because she knew their story was proof of that. The elderly couple who once lost their home now had a new one and a new future, and while the hidden fortune of the lodge would always remain a memory, it no longer held power over them because what truly mattered was the love and strength they shared and the peaceful life they had built together.